the History Channel original podcast, History This Week, January 3rd, 1924. I'm Sally Helm. The shrines stayed untouched for more than 3,000 years, protecting the body of a young Egyptian king who died suddenly and unexpectedly. The priests had to work quickly, placing the mummy inside 3 coffins, one inside the other, and putting a golden mask on his face. The walls were newly covered with plaster. The paint had not even dried yet. The priests left the king with everything he would need in the afterlife: chariots, daggers, trumpets, and some board games. Then they placed his body inside the smallest of 4 shrines, sealed his tomb, and left the dead Tutankhamun lying under the sand, where he stayed for those 3,000 years, until 1922, when archaeologists digging in Egypt's Valley of the Kings found the first steps of the tomb. It is now January of 1924. 2 years have passed. The archaeologists have undone the work of the ancient priests, taking those trumpets and chariots back up the stairs and into the light. And now they have finally reached the king himself. They are about to take apart the shrines that protect King Tut's body. The team is led by a British man named Howard Carter. There are other British and American men there for this important moment: archaeologists, a photographer, a wealthy supporter, along with several Egyptian foremen and an inspector from the Egyptian government. Relationships between Carter and the local government have become more tense in recent months. But all these men have come together here for this important moment. The archaeologists have already broken open the doors of 2 outer shrines around the king's body. Now they break open the 3rd and 4th doors and see the edge of a huge stone coffin. The body is inside. Tutankhamun is being brought into a world very different from the one he left. A world where millions of people will learn his name and where governments around the world will argue over who owns the treasures buried with the young king for his journey into the afterlife. Today, King Tut's tomb. What made this discovery so exciting? And what is the less-known story of the political battles that started when the king's tomb was opened? 1922, the sun rises over Egypt's Nile River. There is a once busy city on its eastern side called Luxor, and across the river, tall hills of limestone and rock. Among them are the remains of ancient temples. And if you go deeper into the mountains, you reach the Valley of the Kings, where the kings of Egypt's 18th and 19th dynasties were buried underground. Professor Christina Riggs is a historian who studies photography and archaeology. She tells us that by 1922, the Valley of the Kings was starting to lose its secrets. Britain had taken control of Egypt in 1882. Many years later, the valley was filled with European archaeologists, each hoping to find something important. And years after that, Riggs and other Western kids like her heard stories about the things those archaeologists had discovered. Riggs first became interested in ancient Egypt in her elementary school in Ohio, while watching a documentary that may have sounded like this one. And what about the Sphinx? That strange and silent figure sitting in the sand near the pyramids. Is it also a tomb? Riggs was hooked. She trained to become an Egyptologist, but in recent years, she started studying not just ancient Egypt, but also the history of Egyptology itself. Riggs felt that the way this history was told was often too simple. After all, it was often written by people who had their own interests, people who were also archaeologists. There is a kind of tendency, like when writing your own family story, to focus on the good parts and hide anything bad or suspicious, and that is not good history. So Riggs decided to write the history herself. Her newest book is about the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, and through her research, she learned a lot about the man who became most famous for finding it, Howard Carter. At least, She learned as much as any historian can. I think he is a difficult person to understand because of how he tells his own story. Howard Carter would later help shape the story of Howard Carter. But here are some things we know. He was born into a large family in London, but spent his childhood living with his aunts in a small town in England. He was not rich or high class. He had little formal education, but Carter was very good at drawing. He loved animals. He was a skilled artist. His father was also a talented artist who painted animals and made portraits of rich people's pets. Howard Carter helped his father with these jobs, which allowed him to meet wealthy people who could support him. They got to know local rich families who supported archaeology in Egypt and had collections of Egyptian objects. When Carter was 17, one of these families helped him get a job in Egypt, copying paintings inside tombs for archaeologists. After a few years, Carter stopped painting and began working as a field inspector, supervising digs in southern Egypt. Howard Carter, who might have otherwise had a simple job somewhere in a small English town, found a new path. Around the age of 31, Carter had a disagreement with the Antiquities Service and left his job. For the next few years, he struggled to find work, selling art to tourists and waiting for a chance to use his archaeology skills again. Then he met someone who could help. George Edward Stanhope Molyneux Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. We will call him Lord Carnarvon. Unlike Carter, Lord Carnarvon was very rich and had permission to dig in Egypt. He came from a wealthy English family. He studied at Trinity College in Cambridge. His family owned a big house in London and a large estate in the countryside called Highclere Castle, which still belongs to the family today. Lord Carnarvon's estate looks like the house from Downton Abbey. In fact, it is the same house used in the show. Carnarvon was a typical rich aristocrat. He enjoyed fast cars and horses. After nearly dying in a car accident, his doctors told him to go to Egypt for better health. While there, he became interested in archaeology as a hobby. Carter and Carnarvon were very different. Carter looked serious and intense, while Carnarvon was stylish and relaxed. They came from very different backgrounds, but Egypt brought them together. Carnarvon even invited Carter to stay at his home in England during the off-season. Carter spent summers at Highclere Castle, joining in activities like hunting and organizing artifacts. He became something like an English gentleman, but he always knew he was not truly one. By 1922, the two men had worked together for 15 years, with Carter leading the digs and Carnarvon paying for them. They had been searching the Valley of the Kings without much success, and rumors began that Carnarvon would stop funding the work. Carter had not yet made a big discovery, and time seemed to be running out. The morning of November 4th, 1922, started like any other for Carter's team. The work depended mostly on Egyptians, from archaeologists to workers clearing away dirt. They were trying to reach the original ground level of the valley. Suddenly, their tools hit something different. It felt like a hard surface. Experienced. Workers knew right away it was stone. They cleared away the sand and saw a step cut into the rock. An ancient staircase appeared. Stories differ about whether Carter was there at that exact moment. He had just returned from Cairo after being away for about 50 days. He later said he was there when the first step was found, but some early reports suggest he may not have been. Either way, the team continued digging. They uncovered 16 steps going down. Halfway down, they found part of a sealed door covered in mud plaster, with marks left by ancient priests. These marks showed if anyone had broken in. Carter read the writing on the door, which said, Tutankhamun. That is when Carter realized they had found something important. They could not continue until Lord Carnarvon arrived from London. So they had to wait, and Carter must have been very excited and nervous during that time. When Carnarvon arrived, the work continued. Carter took photos and notes, then broke down the door. Behind it was a hallway and another door at the end. Carter, Carnarvon, and a few others went down the narrow passage and opened the second door. Carter made a small hole and looked inside with a flashlight. He saw the first of 4 rooms. It must have been a very strange and amazing moment. Carter later described it like a movie scene. Carnarvon asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter replied, "Yes, I see wonderful things." Inside were amazing treasures, statues, chariot parts, vases, and many other objects. Everyone knew this was a huge discovery. A nearly complete set of burial items over 3,000 years old, perfectly preserved. Photographer Harry Burton took pictures of the first room. The world saw these images, and people became fascinated. Newspapers shared the story, and Tutankhamun became famous. Fashion, movies, and even music were inspired by ancient Egypt. But in Egypt, people were upset that a British newspaper had exclusive rights to the story. This was an Egyptian tomb. The discovery also raised questions about who truly owned it. Egyptians felt proud of their history, but also angry about British control. Songs were even written celebrating Tutankhamun and Egyptian identity. At the same time, people argued about where the treasures should go. Before, finds were split 50-50 between Egypt and foreign explorers. But this discovery was special, and many Egyptians wanted everything to stay in Egypt. In 1923, the team prepared to open the next room. Inside, they found large shrines protecting the king's body. But work stopped again because of the heat. Tours were given, and work paused until the next season. Then Lord Carnarvon was bitten by a mosquito. The bite became infected, and he died. Some newspapers called it the mummy's curse, but Egyptians did not believe in such ideas. To them, the dead should be respected. Carter continued his work with new funding. By 1924, he opened the final shrine and saw the stone coffin. But political tension stopped him again. Egypt had gained some independence, and the government wanted control over the tomb. Carter argued with officials and even stopped working for a time. Eventually, a new agreement was made. All treasures would stay in Egypt. Carter returned in 1925 and finally opened the coffin. Inside was the mummy of Tutankhamun, with his famous golden mask. The mask became one of the most famous objects in the world. Tutankhamun was about 19 years old when he died. He came from a powerful royal family and ruled during a time of change. In life and death, he became a symbol of unity for Egypt. By 1932, the work was finished. The treasures were moved to the Cairo Museum. Egyptians celebrated as the items were transported. Later, some items traveled around the world, including the United States, where millions came to see them. Today, the treasures remain in Egypt and will be displayed in the new Grand Egyptian Museum. Egypt is not just about gold or pharaohs. It is also about the people who created these objects and the history they represent.